You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey guys, thanks for jumping on today's episode of the Reinvest Podcast. Something to keep your eye out on from the real estate investing perspective. This is a hot take, is what's going to happen with insurance costs. So if you've been following the news, really in the last year, there's been a couple of large kind of catastrophic things that have affected property insurance, and regionally in different kind of areas of the country.
It was like the hurricane in Florida. There's a lot of people that were uninsured for that because some insurance companies had pulled out or decided not to insure certain properties on the coastline. And then too, with the fires in California, I mean, most of those people were uninsured. And because the insurance companies were pulling out. And so that is a specific regional effect, but really that affects insurance across the nation as some of these big claims come out and, premiums change for everybody. And even year over year from last year to this year, my insurance here in the Midwest even rose about 30%.
Yeah. Well, and those are some of those line items when you're underwriting a property or considering an investment, where to invest. Property insurance and real estate taxes are two large variable costs that sometimes get kind of underrated because they're not super visible, or people just say, well, you're going to have to pay insurance and real estate taxes no matter where you are, but people don't realize how much they can fluctuate based on where you locate. But I think moving forward in the coming months, in this coming year, we're going to see some really some big changes in the insurance side of things on what kind of coverage you can get, the cost for that coverage, what's offered to you as a property owner based on what your property is, where you're located in the country. And I think it's going to shape where people invest to some degree. So anyway, that's just my humble opinion. Would love to hear you guys' feedback on what you're seeing in that way as well. But today we are going to talk about a really cool real estate term that you may not be familiar with called adaptive reuse. And so with us today, and you're going to unpack this for us, is Jeremy Lack with Microloft Studios. Jeremy, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Good morning. How's it going there?
It's going well here. It's a nice, cool, 25 degrees or 30 degrees outside?
Balmy 25.
So we're feeling good. We're feeling very chilled.
Now, Jeremy, you said that you ran today, and your 10-year-old son reminded you that you're not 10 years old anymore?
Yeah, I think the word run might be a little generous, but I appreciate that. Yeah, he's over there. Well, if you can imagine like a dog that when you're running, your dog is kind of doing a very light trot next to you. It's not walking.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like. So it's a little humbling, but it felt good. So,
it is funny though. I think how being a dad, fatherhood definitely pushes you to do some of those things to kind of lead by example and to maybe get back on the wagon for some of those disciplines and whatnot. Yep. My daughter's been the same way for me. She makes it look very easy and effortless. So I'm going to try and maintain that thing as long as possible where my kids don't beat me in anything athletically. And I just want to see how many years until that is not the case anymore.
It'll overtake you in a few years.
Well, I'll tell you the trick. It's to train jiu-jitsu. That's what I do because there's a lot of technique involved, and you don't necessarily have to be pushing yourself. You don't have to exert a lot of energy all the time. You can take little breaks and you can control someone even bigger than you. And so I've got that on my son for a long time until he starts training. So I remind him of that periodically. So it's a lot of fun. That's what I do to stay in shape.
Take him down a couple notches, you know what I mean?
Every young son, though, kind of wants to test dad just to see where he's at on the totem pole. So, well, hey, in addition, this is a good segue. You're also a Navy man, right?
Yeah. I was able to serve for 5 years in the Navy. It was a really fun time.
Awesome. That's awesome, man.
Where were you serving at?
Yeah. I spent my only duty station was in Naples, Italy, southern Italy, for this part of the 6th Fleet Command there.
Yeah, Parlez-vous français?
No, I'm just Italiano.
I'm just kidding. All right. Well, hey, give us a little context to what was your on-ramp into real estate investing? kind of give us that backstory, and then we'll jump in today and talk about what you're doing now.
Right. Well, I basically came at a point in my life where I had some passion projects I wanted to do, and they never, namely, it was, I thought that God had put me on this earth to be a chaplain to the Marine Corps because I highly admire these people. I desire to serve them. And so that's what I want to do. I went to seminary and everything and started getting experience and everything.
Where'd you go to seminary at?
Southwestern Baptist in Fort Worth, if you've heard of that.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So yeah, I went there and graduated. But yeah, so there's some things just never worked out. There's some significant moral failures on my end. And so I actually listened to some of y'all's podcasts and y'all kind of discussed that in the past, I think with Brandon Turner or someone that, and I'm one of those people that you're talking about that you have these significant moral failures that you disqualify yourself. So I found myself in that boat and I still had the desire. So I kind of to serve in that way. So I got really frustrated and I said, well, forget it. I've never been one to want to make a lot of money, but I'm just going to make as much money as I can for the rest of my life to fuel the faith-based missions that I believe in. Because I did repent from those things. My wife and I were divorced because of them, but then we reconciled our marriage through God's grace. So
seriously,
man, amen.
Yeah. So we're all living in the same under the same roof again, and yeah, living for the glory of God over here.
So I know we're talking about a real estate podcast, but Seth and I are both men of faith, and so thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes on our podcast, it's refreshing to see somebody be willing to kind of just, hey, this is who I am, this is where I came from, because in reality, right, we all have those areas that we're walking through. Would you mind sharing a little bit about, like, not necessarily the particulars, but how you worked through that? Because a lot of us have experienced just coming up short, right, through sin or different things, especially since your desire was to be in some kind of a ministry capacity. Like, what were some of the things that you had to work through, not necessarily in your marriage, but just, hey, okay, this is who I am in Christ, or this is God's purpose still in my life, even in spite of, my mess ups?
Right. It just takes, God works on this earth through people, and he used pastors, one in particular here locally, providentially, that I met up with through my wife's supervisor. She's a nurse, and her supervisor had a son-in-law who's a pastor, and he kept after me and after me. I eventually got a DUI, and then the guy's like, I'm about to give up on you if you don't. And so he stuck with me. And then one day we're sitting, and I hadn't really turned from my ways necessarily, abusing alcohol and things like this. We were divorced and all this. And we met up to catch up at Monica's Taco Shop, which is amazing if you ever come to Colorado Springs. And
that's where revival happens, is what you're saying.
At the taco shop.
Yeah.
The food's that good.
Yeah, with a little bit of spice. And we were talking. He was talking about his church has approved him to plant a church on the other side of the city, and that's what really struck me. I was like, what am I doing? Am I even truly a believer? And what am I doing for the kingdom of God? This guy is over here planting churches to spread the gospel. Am I even in the middle of the fight? And what am I doing? Am I even a born again believer? So is in February of 2018, and it struck me really hard. And from that point, I started to do things differently with an actual purpose in mind. And so that changes everything. If you have some significant, unending, eternal purpose to your life that doesn't change, then that really guides your trajectory and your daily habits. So that's what changed everything for me. Yeah. I mean, I was a mess. I got up to 281 pounds. I was thinking of getting up to 300 just to say that I've been there.
What's another 20?
I know. A few more McDonald's chips, but man, I was such a mess. And then by God's grace, and he embodied that grace through my wife, who actually gave me yet another chance after
that gives me chills.
Bouts of infidelity, grossly. It was nasty. And she's just like, she was riding her bike. We'll talk about real estate eventually, but she said she's riding her bike one day and she just felt this overpowering sense that God's saying, show grace yet again. And she did. And I said, if you stick with me, I will not let you regret this. And then that's basically the path I've been on since then, and she's been true to that, and I'm working every day to be true to that as well.
Yeah.
So eventually I just said, okay, this isn't my path to be in ministry. I love the church. I actually still teach a class here at a Sunday school class at church, but I was like, my mission is to, in Romans 10, it tells you either need to be the sender or you need to be the goer. You need to be preaching or supporting that preacher or that missionary. And so I'm going to be supporting these people. So in the world we live, it takes money to accomplish things. So I just need to make a lot of money, and then we'll do more Bible translations, missionary efforts, church planting, things like that. So that's a never ending target to hit. It's not like I'll arrive at a net worth and then I'll stop.
So that's kind of the passion behind maybe what you're pursuing now, maybe segueing into the real estate investing side of things.
Yeah. So I started, and I never really tried to accumulate very much money. So it's actually a newer idea to me. So I started looking at videos. I was Warren Buffett's making a lot of money. So how's he doing it? You got to, put your money in the stock market. I was like, well, I already work 40 something hours a week. If I work another 20 hours a week and keep putting it into the stock market, eventually one day when I retire, I'll have a lot of money sitting there. In the meantime, what happened to your family while you're working 60 hours a week and avoiding them? And so what's the alternative? And I found real estate investing. It was, you and your listeners already know all the upsides, tax advantages and everything, appreciation. You can force appreciation on these deals. And that's what I really liked about it. If you have enough ambition, you can force appreciation on these things and make smart decisions, and you can be helping a community as well in the process. So that's what I went with. And pretty soon, like you discovered, there's a lot of people in single family, which is fine. There's a lot of single family product out there. And then there's more money to be made, it seems like, with larger properties. So you just add a 0 or 2 to what your goals are. You add a 0 or 2 to your projects, and now you're syndicating apartment deals or something else. Something else on a larger scale. So I found out there's.
Yes. Can you before we get too far into maybe what you're transitioning to, can you talk about maybe what your first touch point was, or what your first kind of deal was like? If it was the single family stuff, how did you enter into real estate and, to the point where it made sense to keep pursuing it?
Yeah, absolutely. During that seminary time, I tried to do a fix and flip. I basically broke even. So learned some lessons. And then the house we were in as well was a fixer upper. We moved to Colorado, and the year before last, I just wanted to be in the game doing something. And so I bought this house we can talk about later in a later segment of the show, but I bought a house to do a BRRRR model with, and do it with as a short-term rental and all this. So I did all the work on it on the weekends and had my day job. And then in the middle of that, I was like, for me to achieve my goals and to make a dent in what I'm trying to accomplish, it's going to take about 200 to 300 years at this rate for me to do that. So I was like, I needed 10 or 100x this. What's that going to take? And then just to transition to what I've gotten into, I was like, well, and actually speaking of Brandon, I mentioned Brandon Turner, but he has these little goal setting seminars with your spouse. Yeah. And the proceeds go to benefit a sex trafficking thing and all that. So my wife and I sat down, and it's really long actually, sat down to do that. And that forced me to put a number to exactly what goal am I going to accomplish, and what am I aiming for? And I just said a big number, which is 100. And I didn't even have one at the time. It was like 100 units. And so how am I going to do that? Well, I see these driving back and forth from Oklahoma to Colorado. You see these hotels that they've expired. They're done. They've served their purpose and that they can't be used anymore. So I was like, well, there, you could use that. So I thought this was my idea I just came up with. And this is, So as it turns out, so I started looking into it, and there are people already doing it. It's nothing new, but it still is a good idea.
I've been there a couple of times. I'm like, I just have cracked the code, everybody. And you're like, don't want to share, like, hey, I've got something big cooking. And then you Google it and you're like, shoot. Hey, real quick, one of the things I thought of when you were saying that, though, the goal setting. You sat down, you did the goal setting, you came up with a number of 100, and by setting that goal, you quickly realized that goal, that the strategy that you had was not going to get you there. So you had to actually like change up the strategy. And that is really big. of one of the benefits of thinking big, going bigger, getting outside of your comfort zone is that it forces you into new strategies you wouldn't have otherwise considered. So if someone's listening to this, I think that's one of the huge benefits of having goal setting. Even if you achieve 80% of that, you're going to get further than not having one.
Yeah.
It was one of is it a yogiism? Yogi Bear is like, hey, one of the things you got to be careful of about, if you don't know where you're going is you might not get there. Right. And, it's kind of like a duh thing, but so you came up with this idea, figured out people were doing it, of adaptive reuse, taking hotels, motels, and converting them to multifamily?
Right. Yeah. And I just looked where I always look, which is YouTube. And I found these guys who are doing a workshop on it. And they were still in the early goings of them figuring it out, but they've done the math and the underwriting because they're already, multifamily syndicators. And they stumbled upon this and they're like, wow, this is amazing. And they were in the throes of it and decided to host a few workshops. So I went to one in Vegas. I met with them, and that was the first time I'd been in a room, and I didn't know at the time, been in the room with millionaires, and people that are very successful in this space. And it changed, like you're saying, it changes your mind when you set huge goals. Something has to happen in your brain to cause it to rearrange itself to where now the enemy of this is just having a 2x goal. If I want to make twice as much money with a blue collar background, that means I need to work twice as hard or twice as long. Yeah. If you do 10 or 100x, then now you have to change your beliefs. You have to change a lot of things that you've been doing. So I started to do that. I found myself in that room. There's people like, I don't know if you heard of Neil Balwa, but he's, so he was there and there's like 12 people there. I'm like, what am I doing around these people? So that's where you find yourself. One of the three presenters, name is Alex Cartwright, would be an extremely helpful person that you may want to have on the podcast. But he's the guy that I'm learning all these things from. Very seasoned. You can look up Alex Cartwright, Hotel Shift. I think it's .capital or it might be .com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was like, whatever it takes for me to get this done. If I had it, I would be happy with all of his expertise. And he's an economics professor in Michigan at Ferris State. It's like, if I could pay this guy some money and buy down ignorance and buy down all the time, I'd be happy to do that, to save me years and get me ahead. That would be
I like the way
wonderful.
You said that.
Right.
Buy down ignorance and buy down, what was it?
Time.
By the time, like whatever it takes, whatever he may charge me, well, within reason, it's going to be well worth it. And it has been, absolutely. So now I'm finding myself in the circles that he's in, and now I'm partnering with the people that he knows. And so I just kind of, it's like, in one sense, I don't belong there. In the other sense, I very much belong there because I have the same mentality that they do, which is to conquer the world, kind of one hotel at a time. So it's worked out really well. So it's just,
you were saying that whatever he would charge you, you'd be willing to pay. And you're like, actually, I'm missing a kidney right now, but no, I've never been in a better spot financially.
So the strategy now is to find hotels and, convert them into multifamily. Why don't you give us kind of some step-by-step? How are you finding these hotels? Are you buying them from hotel chains? Are you buying them from like mom and pop private owners that have just let them go over the years? Where do you locate these?
Yeah, so both. So some of them are off market, some are word of mouth, others are through brokers, or also directly with owners. Can I back up one step, if you don't mind, to preface as to why this is so important to do? The issue that I'm addressing, that we are addressing here, is the issue of affordable housing, which has been a problem. And now in many places, like where I live, it's an absolute crisis that people have nowhere to live, that the cost of housing and also rent has far outpaced your average blue collar worker's wages. And so now they find, unless they had that lower interest rate from back in the day, they are in a tough spot right now. And that's not just in Colorado or like Southern California, it's in a lot of the country. So that's why we are doing this, because people cannot, in a free market makes sense on paper of bringing a C-class property online ground up, right? You can't do it unless you
Right.
want to
Right.
lose a lot of money, or unless it's a charity, or unless it's state or government
Subsidized.
Government
subsidized.
subsidized.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that does happen, and no one's really, it doesn't really pan out very well for in a scalable fashion, because the people making money are just kind of the guys putting the sponsors. They'll make a fee on it. That's really where the money is happening. It's not really helpful to investors. So that's the issue. So now we actually can bring a C product, B product online. It's already sitting there. We just have to do the work on it to make it happen. Because there's been a lot of new developments in the last few years, especially in the
Right.
Southeast, for example, Texas. You bring all these apartments online. Well, okay, well now what do you have to charge for them?
Yeah.
Right. And rent, because of the increased cost of
A kidney.
building
Yeah.
materials and everything else, and you have to give your organs to make it work. And so that they're not being totally filled up, right, in a lot of cases, because that just because they're available doesn't mean the average person can afford them, and that's
Yeah.
what we're seeing. So we're not in competition with those people. We're supplementing. We're trying to help. We give kind of the low end of the market. Here's what you can pay. It's a smaller dwelling unit, but maybe that's all you need for this point in your life to get along.
I
So
think what's so funny is you hear these guys talk about everybody has a reason of why they endorse their investment strategy, right? So like guys that are into A-class multifamily are like, well, we love A-class because people have more disposable income, that when recessions, do hit, they're able to weather that storm and stay in a nice product, or people are always going to pay for a nice place to live. Then the B and C class guys are like, well, when the recession happens and people's finances retract, we're a great alternative to provide a clean place to live. So I love that there's always something there, to kind of look at.
They're always justifying the products. But no,
Right.
I mean, yeah, the affordable housing thing, I mean, it's a crisis pretty much across the nation. And I mean, even in our area, Northwest Ohio, some of the new development, small scale stuff that's happening. I mean, these units are coming online and being rented out anywhere from $1,700 to $2,000 a month, which is just
unheard of
in this area.
Yeah,
and it's just not affordable to the majority of the people unless you're coming in and you're a traveling nurse or doctor or, refinery worker or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even interesting here to kind of see how that's playing out.
yeah, and it's great that is happening, because it helps us get our places rented out.
So Jeremy, let's say that you find a hotel, drive by one, or there's a broker that has one. It's being marketed as a hotel, underperforming. And I feel like the disconnects that there would be in value is most of those operators buying a hotel and using it for a hotel purpose are used to looking at the income on a nightly rate. And so typically a healthy hotel is going to be a higher cash flow volume than a multifamily property. But you're not finding stabilized hotels, you're finding underperforming ones. So when you're negotiating, you're identifying these properties, what are the indicators of this is an underperforming hotel?
Yeah, well, I mean, just the fact that they want to sell and they want to exit it. So we should distinguish that hotels. That's not real estate investing. A hotel is a business that you're buying that happens to have real estate attached to it. So hotels don't appreciate like a multifamily asset would, right? So a hotel is about the cash flow, and every hotel has a life cycle. They start out as something that you would like to stay in, like a Holiday Inn or Ramada or something, and then over time, every so often the hotel chain or the brand will tell you to do this PIP, I forgot what PIP even stands for, but your property improvement plan. You have to do all these upgrades every few years or so. And then as the hotel gets older, the owners can't necessarily keep up with those PIPs. They're so expensive, and they devolve from a Holiday Inn down to maybe a Days Inn or something like that. A Days Inn that you may have stayed at, and it stays as a Days Inn for a while, and they can't keep up with it. It's getting old. They can't improve it and make it pencil out, and then it devolves even further to I think we've all been there. I had to stay at a red roof or something.
Right.
what I would call the kiss of death in this cycle is the roadway in.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen a roadway in, that's what. So they're ready to be done. It's on the last
My
cycle
wife
of
and I
its life.
actually, the day we got married, that first night we stayed in a Red Roof Inn. So I can attest to what you're saying.
Classy place, man.
We were broke college students. That's all I can say.
You do what you got to do, but there comes a point where in the life cycle, these hotel owners will eventually resort to letting people staying there long term because that's how they're getting money. People who can't pass a background check, they will go and they'll stay in there. And y'all probably know what I'm talking about. Just there's really strange foot traffic happening around this property. The police are making visits there on a routine basis, and so y'all know exactly what I'm talking about.
We got like 3 or 4 of those in our area.
Well, send them my way. Send me the addresses. We'll fix that. Right. So now it either you need to do away with this eyesore and this magnet for crime, and instead let's do something productive with it. You have to get rid of everyone there, and then they can apply with our property management company, and they can to get their new renovated space within that hotel.
So that was my next question. Let's say you get something under contract. They're already doing like weekly stays. You know, they're 1 foot out the door of being a hotel, and things are trending that direction, which is actually a helpful indicator. When you're doing weekly stays, that's typically maybe not a good sign, is what you're saying?
Yeah, right. It's not good for them because I don't know if you've ever gone to one of these hotels. The one we're about to close on in Savannah is like that. There's some people who've just been staying there long because they can't afford to go out and get an apartment, but they can stay there. They're kind of kind of stuck in the middle there.
So then how do you get rid of everybody, or do you have this phased approach of still allowing that kind of model of tenancy and renting while you put in long-term tenants, like after renovations happen, or do you put a hard stop down, everybody get out of the building, and you just overhaul this property?
Well, it's very project specific. In this particular case, there's actually 3 separate buildings. So we will do a phased approach, and in the phased approach, they do the application, and they can, they pass that, they move right into a fully renovated unit with a proper kitchenette and everything, the correct fire suppression and all that stuff that the city is having us do. So they're usually in a better situation. And the guy I mentioned, Alex Cartwright, some of his tenants, the people who are residents, they're at the hotel that turn into tenants, they actually got a price decrease in what they're paying because your weekly rate at an extended stay is actually it's going to be more expensive than what you would pay as a multifamily.
Most of these, most hotel rooms do not have a kitchen in them.
Or laundry.
So how do you guys navigate that? What typically are you seeing people do with these hotel conversions? Are you adding a full kitchen? Are you adding just a kitchenette? Or if it has a kitchenette, are you just leaving that and adding laundry? What do you guys see?
Yeah, so they absolutely have to have a kitchenette. We're going off what the city's requiring us to do. We bare minimum have to have a kitchenette in there.
What does that definition mean?
So it's going to have a sink that's independent from the bathroom sink. You have to have a bathroom sink. You have to have a kitchen sink. Also has to have a stovetop burner. So we're using a low watt, a 110 2-burner stovetop there. There's also we have a microwave above that where the air circulates in the room. So it's not the hood. But it. That's connected to the HVAC, but it is circulating. Those are some of the minimum requirements. We don't have to have a dishwasher. You don't actually have to have an oven, depending on what kind of long-term debt you're going with. If you're using like HUD debt, you would need a certain minimum square footage of the room, as well as you need a little oven of some sort in there as well, and some other requirements. So the ideal target for us property is one that is an extended stay or already has kitchenettes or is at least plumbed for it. And that's what we have exactly in the Savannah property. It was an extended stay previously. They actually took out the kitchenettes for some reason, but the plumbing is roughed in, and all we got to do is drop in a dedicated circuit to support the little kitchenette there, and then we'll get those hooked up. We just reestablish the plumbing there with it. And the city, another big issue with these is working with the city. And that's a very big component of this whole process. The city has to allow it. in this project we're working on right now, we're
yeah.
about to close on, is the city has already allowed for this. We just need to do some things to the property to make it appropriate for residential.
Are you saying that they already had a provision in their rezoning and use to specify what you guys doing? You don't want to be someone's guinea pig in a municipality where you're the ones doing it for the first time. They already had some clear boundaries and guidelines on it.
Yeah, and it's specific to whatever the plot is, and they've already allowed it on this specific plot, on this specific property. They've allowed it. The other cities, and depending on where the property is zoned, you'll have to go through a full rezoning process. That can be painstaking.
Oh yeah,
but it can be very well worth it, and that's one of the reasons I love this idea of hotel apartments, because it can be a big headache. And it's a high barrier to entry, because I got into multifamily thinking, well, I'll just do these hotel or apartment syndications. It's like, well, there's already all these sharks circling around who know way more than they're going to devour me. I need to go somewhere where there's less people, there's a higher barrier to entry, and it helps out the average blue collar guy. And that's exactly what this is.
So do you see, in these scenarios with this property, maybe in Savannah, you're just going to have some common laundry rooms for people to do laundry on site?
Right. Yeah. We'll have a laundry room there's one already designated for that.
Okay.
Yeah. There happens to be a laundry facility close by.
And then I would imagine that these units are not metered separately for electric and water. Are you doing master meter and doing RUBS charge, or are you just doing the calculus and just putting it all in the rent? Or how are you compensating for that?
Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't make any sense to submeter 100 different units. And so we just do a utility amenity package that includes all that. And hopefully that will be helpful to people, especially in that particular property. You can walk to the gate of an Army airfield right across the street. A soldier coming in for a year or two is just real plug and play. He pays one flat fee and doesn't think about connecting with the city on anything. Yeah,
that's
and
awesome.
We can actually have these we have the stuff to have this stuff furnished too as well.
What are these costs? I mean, for a unit, what are you charging people in Savannah now? I mean, what's maybe market rate rent, and then what are you guys going to be bringing to the market? And what's your estimated rent?
Right. So mostly when you doing a market analysis, that you want to look at what they're charging for a 1-bedroom, not new apartment, something that's a little bit older, something that's dated about what ours is. You don't want to look for a studio typically, because those are all A class and they're in very, very nice amenities. And so it's not a very good way to gauge what rents are. So we look at a comparable 1-bedroom and go down from there. So in Savannah, for instance, we're looking right now, the conservative rent estimate is $1,125 per month, and that's higher than what you would think, because that market is so hot right now, and they just can't bring on enough product to meet the demand. There are people with vouchers for to have their housing subsidized that are just waiting for something to move into. Thousands of people. Yeah. So it's a great market for that. And then, so we'll have that rent base plus, and then we'll have a little utility package in there.
Awesome.
And so, so whatever you look for, if you go on rent.com or something, we will be at the low end of it. Yet you're going to get a newly renovated unit, and the property will be clean and up to our standards, and it will be safe for you to live in. And it's not going to be a slum.
So let's thinking about some of the amenities that a hotel might have in place when it's being utilized in that way, such as a pool. Do you guys look at that as a plus that you can kind of offer and amenitize to the new tenants after the conversion, or do you just kind of like
fill in the pool? Yeah,
fill in the pool, forget about it because it's more of a liability than it is an asset.
It's very deal specific. This one doesn't have a pool. If it did, we'd rely heavily on what the property management company that we put our trust in. We'll see what they say about it. Because I've had guys say, you definitely have to fill that thing in. And we would say, okay. And another guy says, hey, we've seen that this actually will bump your rents up a little bit. If you have this amenity, then we would listen to what they have to say. Yeah. So it's maybe just a case by case.
Yeah. I could see area of the country would make a big difference on that too. Mm-hmm. So indoor or outdoor pool, but
Yeah, the amenities make a big difference when you're the average size of a hotel room, 280 square feet. If that's the space you have to live with, some common spaces are very helpful to have. That's why I've been starting to target more of this 1970s, 80s, and 90s convention center full service style motel or hotels
Oh
that
yeah.
were great back in the day, and now you can't keep up with them being viable as a hotel and where someone's going to have come and have their conferences and stuff. They're old and tired looking. They're starting to look
Mm.
drab. You can transform those spaces. Like I keep telling people, what I keep the other partners, like once we get one of these has to be a jujitsu studio, because
Oh
I'm going
yeah.
to be there like visiting and stuff. But anyway, something like
Yeah.
that. Or speaking of the faith based, angle
Churches,
on it,
yeah,
you could,
worship
yeah, there's
gatherings.
all kinds of churches that are always starting out or
Yeah.
growing, and they're going to rent one of these conference spaces out, and that's a great tenant. You could also there's a colleague of mine is looking to get under contract on one in Michigan with this big convention space in it, and they're trying to figure out what to do. Do you turn it into self storage or what? That doesn't really make sense, but you could use it for any of these purposes. You could rent it out to the law enforcement and let them use it as a training facility or something like that. But
Yeah. Kind of
there's always
opens up a
something that you can do.
whole nother avenue of some way to drive some income for that property. We are going to
Absolutely.
move into our smaller pockets segment. So, Jeremy, go ahead and tell us about a real estate deal for you that went wrong. It could have been when you were still doing some single family stuff. What went wrong? And then, most importantly, what did you learn from it?
Yeah, there's the last property I did before getting into the hotel conversions. There was a house. I wanted to be in the game doing anything, and I didn't have the patience to wait for a really good deal. So I just jumped in with the best deal I could find. So here in Colorado, we have these old mining towns, and on I-70, as you're on your way to the ski resorts in Summit County, there's this little town called Silver Plume, and it was part of the epicenter of the gold rush and silver rush that we experienced here. And so this really old mining town is there. There's an old house. So I was like, well, we'll just buy it and we're going to renovate it. And it's going to be a short-term rental. And we're going to make a lot of money doing that. And that's just how we're going to make money.
Easy
And
money.
oh man, it's so easy to do this. You just like just hand over fist. And so I bought it. I didn't buy it right. It was okay. It was an okay deal, especially if it's your primary residence. It would have been okay. But I didn't buy it deeply enough because I was impatient. We ended up just we ended up actually living in it, so I could be working on it on the weekends. We lived in there for 1 year, and I still had my W-2 job during the week. And I did an okay job. I did a fine job renovating it myself, and it's a nice little house. In the middle, and also the interest rates were kind of high, like 6.85 was high. And I was like, I was
Mm-hmm.
explaining to my wife, hey, I understand how this works. Interest rates will be down, and we're going to do this cash out refi, or we're just going to do it, whatever on it. I was like, I've got the master plan here. And, a year comes up and it's like, interest rates are slightly higher now, actually. And I
Yeah.
was like, so, maybe you should have ran the plan by somebody else. So I was banking on a lower interest rate for
Yeah.
one. I was also banking on us getting this approval for the short-term rental. So in the middle of that year, that township changed their policy on this, and now you got to get on
Oh,
a waiting list,
no.
and you have to live there for a couple of years before you can apply. And I'm like, well, we're only here just to have fun in the mountains for a year, and because of the ski slopes, we need to we got to get back down to civilization. So it turned out to be a midterm rental. That's the way it is right now, and it's doing fine. We lose at the moment. We lose a little bit of money on it actually as a midterm rental, but it was a good experience because it pushed me to realize that I need to do something. I can't just 2x income.
Yeah.
I need to 10x. I need to do something totally different.
So
So it was,
you're
it was
so you're
helpful in that way.
losing a little bit of money every month. Why are you not selling? Is it still a good area that you foresee appreciating in the future and you're just going to hang on to it from that aspect?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Would want to sell and get our equity back out of it. And so it was on the market to sell. That's when this last year when the housing just really slowed down last summer
Yeah.
quite a bit. It
Yep.
seemed like, at least here. And then in the middle of us trying to sell it, and we had completely moved out of it, my wife had a list on Evolve as a midterm rental. And we didn't get any bites on it, so that's how we knew we needed to sell it. So one night she calls me because I'm doing something, and she says, "Hey, someone just booked this thing," and she forgot that it was on Evolve still. So someone booked it for 8 months, and I was like, "It's empty. We don't have, and you have to have it furnished, obviously." So in the next 12 hours, they have to be able to move in the next night. And
oh my gosh.
and it was empty. It was like, and so we contacted Evolve. It was like, "Hey, sorry, we didn't mean to have this on here. We're just going to take it off. This was a mistake." And they're like, like, you didn't end your contract with us. The penalty to get out of this thing was almost equivalent of that 8-month stay that she would have. So we're like, all right. So my wife, she gets online and just orders everything you need off Walmart. .com, and I go by Walmart, load it all. I have this little Subaru Outback. I make 2 round trips, get all the stuff into the house, and spend that whole night till 3 a.m. like assembling everything, throwing all the silverware in, and like putting a bed together. I went and got off Facebook Marketplace, got this little bed, and we already had 2 beds in there, but she another one, and to get everything in there so the lady could get in.
Wow.
And I was catching a flight the next morning. It's like it was
oh my gosh,
what
a wild ride for that house.
It was ridiculous.
So that's why you still have it rented out after this 8-month stay. Are you going to try to sell it, or are you going to try to hang on to it?
Yeah, we still want to sell it. So there's already a couple people who've gone and looked at it. We also, why it's not penciling out very well at the moment is we went with the Evolve's introductory rent, which is low actually, just to get your first reviews going. And well, unfortunately, since she did it for 8 months, we're locked in at that lower rate.
She saw that. She was like, "Man, this is a steal. I'm going to rent this thing out."
I can't believe that there wasn't a stipulation with Evolve on the maximum term limit that somebody could, book that at that rate.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But our hands were tied at that point, so we went with
lessons
it.
Learned.
It was a learning experience.
Yeah, learning experience, and hopefully, by the time you sell in the back end, you make a little bit of money, and you have all your equity back out and all your rehab costs back out, and you can look at that and say, "Wow, what an experience that we all got as a family for the last 2 years."
It was fun. They were 15 minutes away from Loveland ski area, so they're out snowboarding all the time. We homeschool, awesome. So like they're any day of the week, they're just going up there, going on hikes or whatever, enjoying the lakes nearby. So it was a fun experience, but we made the most of it. But yeah, we still have it. We'll sell it or maybe re-up as a midterm at a actual market rate. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, man, we're going to go into our show segment called our little nugget. So, Jeremy, this is the part of our show where you give our listeners a practical takeaway or something fundamental that you just operate your life, your business by that would apply to their real estate investing businesses.
Yeah, far and away would be Who Not How, and that's probably one of the most profound book titles I've ever seen. I've never read it, so that's why I'm just saying it's a profound title, because you get it just by looking at the title. And that's been true at every turn for me, because whatever it is you're trying to achieve or whatever it is you want, someone knows how to get there, or they've been there, or they can help you in one piece of it, one way or the other. But as a single family type house flipper or investor, you can do it by yourself. And eventually you're going to get crushed over the long haul in one way or another, or you just can't scale unless you have a team of people who know what they're doing and can help you. And so I found that to be overwhelmingly true with this hotel conversion, because I don't know anything. So I had to ask everybody. And now, and once I introduced it to people, I realized actually I do know quite a bit about this. And so,
it's weird how much you don't think you know, because you know the vastness of the space, but then when you get around other people who are just starting out, you're like, wow, I've actually come a long way. And it's kind of one of those reaffirming things in your journey as you continue to learn and do more deals and get more experience. It happens over time, but that compounding effort of keep going really pays off. So
what's been one of the best resources in your business development?
one of the best resources is, I mean, it would definitely be relationship mentorship I have with Alex Cartwright, who has already been doing this. And I was like, I'll give you money and you tell me everything you know. And that's exactly what's happened. So
Awesome.
again, it comes with relationships. Like he'll know something. If he doesn't, he'll find it out from someone else. So that, and within that circle is where I found, like, I don't know anyone with money to put into this stuff. Well, in that circle, I found people who do, and they live in LA and they know a lot of people who want to invest. So it's worked out very well. And the people in LA don't necessarily want to be the boots on the ground people that are out there, evicting people and throwing down LVP and doing all that kind of stuff, wrangling with the city and all that. So it works out really well.
Cool. How can people find out more about you and follow your success?
Yeah. The website would be microloftstudios.com, microloftstudios.com. You might have a link to that in the show notes, but also, and then LinkedIn, me personally, on LinkedIn, you type in my name, Jeremy Lack, L-A-C-K, and then you can put in affordable housing after that as well, just to get to me quicker.
Awesome.
But you can connect with me that way.
Yeah, we'll get those links in the show notes. And man, we really appreciate you coming on the show today to talk to us about kind of something different. I don't know if we've ever talked about converting hotels to multifamily on this podcast before, but it seems like a great idea, great cause. And I know you're going to do great on this next deal you're working on.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Jeremy. As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.